The cold, mechanical hum of my laptop was the only sound cutting through the heavy silence of my small apartment as the clock crept past midnight. For years, I had grown accustomed to the quiet, finding a strange kind of peace in the hours where the rest of the world was fast asleep. In the dark, there were no expectations, no heavy sighs of disappointment from my father, and no sharp, mocking comments from my younger sister, Amber. But that night, the fragile sanctuary I had spent months building away from my family was instantly shattered by a single notification banner flashing across my screen. It was a link to a public Facebook video posted by my father, Daniel Callahan, and within less than 3 hours, it had already accumulated tens of thousands of local views. I clicked the link with a steady hand, though my stomach instantly dropped into a cold, hollow pit as my father's face filled the frame. He was standing in the middle of our family's backyard, holding a glass of scotch, his voice booming with a cruel, mocking laughter that I knew all too well. "I just wanted to make a public announcement to all our friends and neighbors tonight," my father said, his face flushed with a mixture of alcohol and unearned arrogance. "Our eldest daughter, Sarah, has officially failed her third consecutive independent design contract, proving once again that she prefers living off excuses rather than doing real work. We've officially decided to cut her off from the family name entirely, so if she approaches any of you looking for a loan or a handout, please do yourselves a favor and turn her away." The video didn't end there. It featured cutaway clips of Amber standing in the background, her face arranged into a mask of fake, exaggerated sympathy as she nodded along with every word. I sat entirely still in the blue light of my monitor, my breath hitching in my throat as I watched the toxic comments from old high school acquaintances begin to stack up beneath the post. To understand how a father could publicly broadcast his own daughter's struggles to the entire community, you have to understand the sick, systemic dynamic of the Callahan household. For as long as my memory stretched, I was the designated scapegoat, the child whose hard work was completely invisible and whose minor setbacks were treated like unforgivable sins. Amber was the golden child, a girl who floated through life on a heavy cushion of praise, luxury gifts, and absolute freedom from any form of accountability. When Amber crashed her first car into a neighbor's stone wall while driving without a license, my parents quietly paid the damages, bought her a newer model the next week, and blamed the street lighting. When I stayed up until dawn studying for a corporate design fellowship, my father would violently knock on my door, screaming that the light from my room was driving up the monthly utility bill. They branded me as the slow one, the difficult one, the family failure who lacked the natural charm and effortless brilliance that Amber supposedly possessed in spades. I swallowed the bitterness for over a decade, channeling my isolation into mastering the complex worlds of user interface architecture and digital intellectual property law. I believed that if I could just build a flawless professional reputation, if I could just secure enough high-level corporate success, my parents would finally be forced to see me. But as I watched that humiliating video continue to rack up shares, a strange, terrifying shift occurred deep inside my mind, completely freezing the final remnants of my grief. My years of training in digital forensics and corporate compliance instantly overrode the pain, prompting me to download the video file and examine its metadata out of pure habit. As I began to dissect the digital trail behind the post, a massive, dark plot twist began to unfold on my screen with absolute, horrifying mathematical certainty. The humiliating video wasn't just a spontaneous, thoughtless act of cruelty from an arrogant, drunken father who wanted to vent his personal frustrations. The metadata revealed that the video had been shot nearly 3 weeks earlier, professionally edited on a high-end software suite, and uploaded from an enterprise server. That enterprise server belonged directly to a newly registered medical tech startup based downtown, a company whose corporate documents listed Amber Callahan as the sole founder. The burning truth hit me like a physical blow to the chest. The public smear campaign was a highly calculated corporate strategy orchestrated entirely by my own sister. Amber had intentionally used our father to completely destroy my professional reputation among local tech circles right before she launched her grand startup. She needed to ensure that no firm in the city would ever hire me or trust my word, because her entire startup was built on a foundation of pure, unadulterated intellectual property theft. 2 months prior, during a rare family dinner where I foolishly let my guard down, Amber had asked to see the private design portfolios I was developing for a revolutionary patient tracking software. I had trusted her, allowing her to scroll through my private cloud servers while I helped our mother carry dishes into the kitchen. Amber had quietly duplicated my proprietary source codes, my interface architecture, and the complete encryption frameworks that I had spent 3 years of my life perfecting. By launching the public video first, she had created a narrative where I was a bitter, lazy failure, ensuring that if I ever tried to speak out about her theft, the community would dismiss me as a jealous sibling. A wave of icy, dangerous calm washed over me as I looked at the corporate filings of Amber's new company, realizing that she had already secured $500,000 in seed capital from local angel investors. She thought she had executed the perfect corporate execution. She thought my typical compliance and quiet silence would allow her to ride my hard work straight to a multi-million-dollar buyout. But she made a fatal mistake by forgetting that I wasn't just a creative designer. I was a certified digital compliance specialist who knew the federal legal system better than any expensive attorney she could ever hire. I didn't waste a single second crying over the sister who had stolen my future, or the father who had gladly acted as her executioner for the sake of his own pride. I opened my secure legal console, immediately drafting an official federal Digital Millennium Copyright Act takedown notice, backing it up with the encrypted forensic hashes of my original files. Within 3 hours, using my priority credentials with the hosting platform, I managed to freeze the viral video entirely, replacing my father's smug face with a stark, gray compliance notice. The next step required a much heavier hammer, a deployment of legal warfare that would completely dismantle the parasitic startup before it could even finish its first round of funding. I retained the services of a top-tier federal intellectual property firm, handing them a heavy black binder containing the absolute, undisputed proof of Amber's fraud. The binder held the historical timestamps of my private servers, the matching lines of stolen proprietary code, and the forensic footprint of the enterprise server where the video was compiled. On Thursday morning, just as Amber was preparing to host her grand launch gala for her wealthy investors at a luxury hotel downtown, my legal team struck. We filed a massive federal copyright infringement lawsuit against Amber's company, accompanied by an emergency ex parte injunction to freeze all her corporate development assets. I didn't send a warning text, and I didn't call our mother to complain. I simply instructed my attorneys to deliver the official legal summons directly to the registration desk of her investor gala. At the exact moment Amber stood on the stage in her expensive designer suit, smiling brightly before a room of wealthy venture capitalists, a certified process server walked up the steps. He handed her the heavy federal summons right under the bright stage lights, his voice echoing clearly through the microphone as he announced her corporate fraud in front of the entire room. Simultaneously, an automated email blast containing the complete forensic paper trail of the stolen code was delivered directly to the secure inboxes of every single one of her primary investors. The fallout was a magnificent, brutal domino effect that completely shattered the family's reality within less than 24 hours. When the angel investors realized they had funded a company built entirely on stolen property and facing a federal lawsuit, they instantly pulled their capital, freezing her corporate bank accounts. The luxury tech startup collapsed into absolute ruin before the caterers could even finish cleaning up the untouched champagne glasses from the launch gala. But the most satisfying layer of the human karma unfolded directly on the digital battlefield where my father had attempted to humiliate me. When the local community saw the gray compliance notice replacing the viral video and news of the federal lawsuit leaked into the local business journals, the narrative flipped completely. My father's personal Facebook page was instantly flooded with a massive, unyielding wave of backlash from the local neighborhood and old family friends. Dozens of comments began to stack up hour by hour, calling him a pathetic, abusive bully who had weaponized his own daughter's life to fund a corporate criminal scheme. The local country club where my father spent his weekends quietly suspended his membership, citing the immense public scandal and the toxic nature of the federal fraud allegations. He was forced to sit in his quiet suburban living room, watching his pristine social status dissolve into pure scorn because of the very greed he had nurtured in his favorite daughter. Amber's career in the tech industry was permanently dead before it even began, her name flagged in every corporate compliance registry as a high-risk liability who was banned from securing venture capital. They tried to initiate a desperate counterattack, using our mother to send a flurry of weaponized, weeping text messages to my phone at all hours of the day. "Sarah, please think about what you are doing to this family," my mother sobbed in a voicemail, her voice shaking with a burning panic that no longer had any power over me. "Your father's blood pressure is dangerously high, and Amber is locked in her room crying every single day. You have plenty of money from your independent consulting work. Why do you have to ruin your own sister's life over a simple dispute about computer files? If you don't drop this terrible lawsuit and tell the business journals that it was all a big misunderstanding, we will never forgive you as long as we live." The utter lack of real accountability in her voice was so breathtaking that a soft, cold laugh escaped my lips as I deleted the message without a second thought. I didn't write long, defensive paragraphs explaining my pain, and I didn't beg them to understand the depth of their betrayal. I simply allowed the federal court system to do the talking for me. When the 30-day legal deadline arrived, Amber was forced to sign a formal, binding settlement agreement that stripped her of every single line of the stolen code and banned her from ever working in user interface design. My parents were forced to liquidate a substantial portion of their private savings just to cover the massive legal fees Amber had accumulated during her short-lived corporate venture. They had spent a lifetime treating me like a disposable resource, believing that my role as the family scapegoat meant I was obligated to endure their cruelty in silence. They had to learn the hard, agonizing way that when you push the quietest person in the room too far, you don't get an apology, you get a lesson in consequences. Years passed, and the white-hot anger that had once defined my relationship with my family slowly hardened into a peaceful, unyielding boundary of absolute independence. I built a highly successful consulting firm in the city, bought a beautiful, sun-filled brownstone with large glass windows, and surrounded myself with genuine, supportive friends. I never initiated contact with them, choosing to live my life as if the first 25 years of my existence had been a story written about a completely different person. But the true, bittersweet aftermath of our broken dynamic revealed itself during a rare family lunch that my mother begged me to attend for her milestone birthday. I arrived at the quiet, upscale restaurant downtown wearing a tailored executive blazer, my posture entirely calm, relaxed, and completely free of the old anxiety that used to choke me in their presence. My parents were already sitting at the corner table, looking significantly older, the sharp, aggressive edges of their arrogance completely softened by years of social isolation and financial struggle. Amber sat next to our father, her face pale, devoid of the smug, venomous smile she used to wear like a weapon during our childhood. She was currently working a low-level administrative job at a local insurance firm, her grand dreams of becoming a tech billionaire entirely buried beneath the permanent weight of her legal history. "Can we get you something to drink, Sarah?" my father asked, his voice rough, hesitant, and entirely stripped of the booming authority he used to project so easily at our kitchen table. I shook my head gently, offering a polite, professional smile as I sat down in the upholstered chair opposite him. "Just water for me, thank you." The lunch proceeded in a slow, careful silence, a heavy contrast to the chaotic dinners of our youth where my every word was intercepted and turned into an insult. They spoke about the local weather, the state of the neighborhood gardens, and the latest town politics, completely avoiding any mention of my career, my success, or the past. They had finally learned that they no longer possessed the right to my life, and that a single crossing of my boundaries would result in me walking out the door and never returning. I watched my father struggle to open a tightly sealed bottle of mineral water, his hands trembling slightly with the frailty of old age, and felt a profound sense of closure settle deep into my heart. There was no grand, cinematic moment of apology, and there were no tears of deep remorse shed over the dinner plates, because some breaks are simply too wide to ever be bridged by words. But as I looked at the three of them sitting together, trying so desperately to maintain a thin veneer of polite conversation, the final layers of my resentment vanished completely. They had spent their entire lives trying to make me shrink so that Amber could look large, completely blind to the fact that they were destroying the only foundation their family actually had. Now, they were forced to survive in the quiet, empty world they had created for themselves, living with the knowledge that their favorite scapegoat had become the only one who truly conquered life. I paid the entire bill for the lunch before my father could even reach for his worn leather wallet, stepped out of the restaurant, and walked back into the bright afternoon sunlight. As the cool city wind rushed past my face, I knew with absolute certainty that I was fully liberated, a woman who had turned the coldest betrayal into a masterpiece of pure self-worth. If you are listening to this story right now, and you are the child who has been branded as the family failure, the one whose silence has been treated like a weakness, I want you to hear me clearly. Your path is not defined by the limitations of the people who were supposed to guide you, and your future is not a sacrifice that you owe to a toxic household dynamic. Strength does not mean letting people destroy your dignity for the sake of a fake family peace that only benefits the people who are using your name. True power is born the exact moment you stop begging for the validation of people who are blind to your value, and you begin to use your intellect to protect your own boundaries. My corporate victory was a beautiful achievement, an airtight deployment of legal strategy that protected my hard work from the hands of thieves. But the true victory, the one that allowed me to look into the mirror every single morning with a peaceful smile, was the freedom of knowing that I am enough. Home is not a geographic structure where you are forced to minimize your intellect to make insecure people feel safe in their arrogance. Home is where your boundaries are treated as absolute, where your hard work is honored, and above all else, home is where you are respected.